I wish more teams had the bravery to say or ask, how do you experience me when I'm at my best?
Mm.
How do you experience me when I'm not at my best? And then to commit to the team, I'm going to work on that second one. And would you help me if you see that I'm not at my best, if I'm leaking, if I'm causing trouble, would you come and show me? I think if more teams did that, it would build team health literally overnight. It's not about all of us always doing our best. It's about a culture where we make room for everyone to be human.
Well, g'day. Thanks for entering the Gray Zone. I'm Robby, your host, and this is the podcast where our theories come to die, our theology gets tested, and as always, we remember on the other side of these issues, there's a person whom God loves. Today, my guest is Steve CUSS. Steve CUSS is an author, speaker, lead pastor, and he has two great books. One is called Managing Leadership Anxiety, and the other, The Expectation Gap. And in my conversation with Steve, we just talk about a lot of good ideas about how to manage your anxiety, especially as a pastor and a Christian leader. He's got a lot of wisdom, and he's just such a delightful guy to listen to and to talk to. I think you're going to really be inspired to maybe look inside yourself a little deeper after this conversation and hopefully get some tools. He's got a great website you can check out called Steve Cuss Words, which is hilarious. And you can check out all of his resources and things there that his team does. But here's my conversation with Steve CUSS. Well, g'day. Thank you once again for entering the Gray Zone. I am Robby, your host, and as always, thank you for listening and thank you for being with us. Today, I'm happy to bring to you a really excellent guest. That is Mr. Steve CUSS. Steve, welcome to the Gray Zone.
Thanks, Robby. Good to be with you.
Steve, you have, I'm curious how long you've been in the U.S. I actually don't know. Obviously, you're originally from Perth, I've heard.
Yep.
But how long since you've been stateside?
Yeah, I moved to United States 1992 for Bible college, thinking the whole time I'd go back home after college, and I've been here ever since.
Well, I have some similarities in my story there, except actually did end up back home. But yeah. We'll have to do a whole podcast just on what it's like living on an overseas visa, trying to be a pastor who, as most people know, don't make a whole lot of money,
right?
Despite the common narrative in the media,
right?
But perhaps for another day. So, Steve, you have done a lot of jobs. Would you maybe just take us briefly through what were some of the ministry careers that you've had and where you've landed now, which will kind of explain where we want to go in this conversation?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So during college, I did an internship. It started out as 3 months. It ended up being a year and 3 months. That was on a ranch in Montana, helping kids who got in trouble. They would generally be sent to this ranch, 1,000-acre cattle ranch in Montana, and I interned there in college. After college, I was a hospice and trauma chaplain at University of Tennessee Hospital in Knoxville, Tennessee. Then I went to grad school. I did some youth ministry and guitar teaching in grad school, and then ended up in Las Vegas. I was functionally a crisis intervention pastor at a really big church in Las Vegas. Then I was a lead pastor for 16 years here in Colorado, and now I'm I help people lower anxiety in the workplace. I do teaching, speaking, and consulting about reactivity and all of the dynamics that deplete us, the dynamics inside us, and the dynamics, relational dynamics we catch from other people. I learned a lot of that in chaplaincy in grad school, but that's probably what I'm most well known for.
And that's how I came to know about you. And I think you've had a dramatic sort of career life change, even just over the past few years of moving into this space full time. Has that been fun, exciting, scary, all the above? Like, what's that change been like?
It's been fun and scary. It's been fun more than scary, but it was scary for quite a while. I don't think I'm afraid anymore. Although, frankly, like most of our family's financial security is based on my ability to travel. So my health and travel health, become like essential. So that freaks me out once in a while. But it's overwhelmingly been unbelievable. The doors that God has opened, the people I get to meet. I feel like, what I loved about pastoring, I feel like I got a front row seat to God's work in the lives of congregants. I just feel like I get that same privilege, but now it's global. I'm all over the world and mostly working with pastors, missionaries, Christian leaders, and marketplace leaders of Christian nonprofits. That's my primary group of people I help.
And I'm sure none of them would ever experience any anxiety at all. So, I mean,
Right.
the field is white for the harvest, right?
Oh, there's plenty of work. And, I do think, I think it's really interesting, Robbie. Christians, when we're young, certain types of people are attracted to certain kinds of ministry, and people who are attracted to intense causes like childhood poverty or trafficking, things like that, or people who are attracted to generally caring. When we're young, we just think it's all God's call. And as we get older, we realize it's also that each of us are working something out in our own life. There's some dysfunction in our own life. And that's what usually gets us all into trouble. Not that God didn't call us. I really do believe God called me into what I do. But it took me a while to realize, oh man, I am equally working out my own pain and woundedness. And so as I work with people who kind of are motivated by difficult mission or helping people in chronic need, we all kind of have the same dysfunction we're trying to sort out, I think.
And there's a million directions to go with that. What are these primary focus points of your ministry now? I guess let's nail that down, and then we can nuance from there. You say anxiety, and that brings up a lot of different concepts for everyone. So
Yeah.
how do you define anxiety? And what I've heard you say, anxieties, plural.
Yeah.
And what are the common ones that you're coming across?
Yeah, that's a really important question. If I had to summarize my work, I'm a pastor, so my fundamental job is help people in their connection to God. That's my primary role in life, and I do it in a unique way. It's so funny, Robbie. I have a master's degree in Bible, but mostly what I use is helping people pay attention to their own reactivity and their own coping mechanisms that are getting in the way of their well-being. And so if we can get a little philosophical, Jesus talked about love of God, love of neighbor, love of self. And most of us get 2 out of 3 of those. Well, we're very earnest about loving God. We pour out for others, but it's our well-being inside that tends to get neglected. And you and I have both been up close and personal to organizations where a leader is not well, but they're still proclaiming Christ. And terrible things happen when that goes on. So my job is fundamentally leader well-being. That would be number 1. And number 2, it would be teaching leaders how to bring to the surface the invisible dynamics, the underground dynamics that infect team health, the predictable patterns that happen on every team, and get all of that above ground to talk about it so that you as an individual can be emotionally regulated and well, and that your team can also be emotionally regulated. When a leadership team are all working on being well on my own and well with each other, ministry thrives.
So what do you say to the response of the leader who says, well, mostly we're focused on the gospel. That's our number 1 mission. Yeah. Right? Because I'm sure you would have that.
Yep. Yeah. So I would just point to the never-ending list of leaders who focused on the gospel while they were emotionally sick. And unfortunately, even if we just go back 7 years, 2018 to now, there is a never-ending list of those leaders. So when you are not well and you proclaim Christ, you proclaim a distorted gospel. And the best case scenario is people don't see the real Jesus. The worst case scenario, which is the more common one, is people get profoundly damaged in the name of Jesus. And so I think fundamentally your well-being, your character, your integrity, your emotional regulation is a linchpin to being able to proclaim Christ. Every one of us, Robbie, have worked for a boss that anyone would want to work for. And we've all probably worked for a boss that no one would ever want to work for. Yeah. And the difference between those two is usually their emotional regulation.
It's reminding me of the Bible, how it says that our lives are an epistle read and known by all men.
Yeah.
And how easily our epistle can get in the way of what we say, this good, pure gospel. That's what we're all about. I'll sleep when I'm dead, everything poured out for the gospel. There's a tension there, isn't there? Of like, yes, this is the goal and the ultimate, purpose of all of our lives is to bring people to the knowledge and a relationship with God.
Yeah.
Yet you're saying if we go too gung-ho one way, we're actually doing damage in the name of God sometimes. And we all know the damage that creates in people's lives.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly right.
So I've heard you talk a lot. I'm playing Steve's greatest hits in my head and just asking you to riff on them a bit. You talk about our relationship with ourself as being the most neglected relationship in our lives. Can you expand on that a little? Because when I heard that, I'm driving in my car and I had to pull over and be like, he's right. I have a terrible relationship with myself. I'm the meanest guy on earth to me, and I'm the hardest guy on earth to me, and I'm the most disappointed in me, and I have a bad relationship, but I don't ever stop to examine that. And you started to get me to do that.
Yeah. So to me, it does start in Genesis 3. If we go back to Adam and Eve and the fall, we see that Adam blamed Eve, Eve blamed the serpent. When humans are dysregulated, we fixate on another person instead of pay attention to ourselves. So we call it in the Bible blaming, Adam blamed Eve, Eve blamed the serpent. So blaming, yeah, that happens a lot. You and I have seen that a lot. But what gets more interesting is just the simple idea that we fixate on others. So in my case, I am much more comfortable helping you than helping myself. I just get very uncomfortable noticing if I need something. I'm not good at asking for help. I'm just much more at ease pouring out, serving, fixating on the other. Well, you might say, oh, wow, Steve, what an amazing gospel Christian. Well, maybe. There's probably part of that that's true, but also if I dig deeper, I soon discover, neglecting myself has actually been a coping mechanism to survive life for a long time. So yeah, we encourage you to put yourself on your conscious list of relationships, and I encourage people to play a very simple game, and it's simply write down 3 things that you do or say to people who you love, and then write down 2 things that you do or say to yourself that you would never do or say to people you love. And just in that simple exercise, you quickly discover that you are violating 1/3 of Jesus' greatest commandment. And as it turns out, your capacity to love God and receive God's love and love neighbor is inexplicably linked to love of self. It's not about self-acceptance. It's not about self-care. It really is fundamentally about worship and encountering Christ. So in my own life, I just found that my own self-talk, my own treatment of myself, the things that I would never do to you, were in direct violation of the way God treats me, and turned out to be functionally a false gospel that I was living under, self-condemnation and negative self-talk. And again, it's not some kind of Stuart Smalley Saturday Night Live sketch where I just affirm myself no matter what, even if I'm in sin, so long as it's not that. It's actually the opposite. Once I notice myself, I'm actually quicker to repent. I'm less threatened by saying sorry. I'm more able to actually see what's going on with you because I'm not just on autopilot rushing in with all my triggers. And, Robby, I first learned this when I was a chaplain at 24. I was so surprised to discover that if I wanted to really help others, I had to be profoundly connected to myself. That was surprising because if I wasn't, I would carry all my reactivity and subconscious triggers into the room and not actually be of help to those people.
I've seen that up close, and that's when I started doing pastoral care. That's when I started to discover, similar to what you are saying. I found out 2 things. I needed to take a lot more time to pray and figure out where I was at before walking into a situation, and I needed much better apologetic base to actually bring to people that had questions that I didn't know how to answer.
Yeah.
But you're right. We can. I see this a lot in chaplaincy where we can go in, not be aware of ourselves, not even realize that we're responding from a tired place, a sad place, an angry place, an
Yeah.
unregulated, and walk out of that room having filled it with ourselves. And there was no room for that person who needed our care to fill that room. And suddenly we've walked away and they're still a mess and we aren't even aware of what we've done. We can trample over other people because we were too large in the room. And that's a soft skill that isn't easy. I hate that word, but it's a emotional intelligence.
Yeah, and sometimes people, if they're in the room with someone who's really suffering, what people don't realize is that it triggers your own fear of death and your fear of suffering, and so you end up subconsciously trying to give that person advice. I have a friend. I was just with her and her husband last week, and she's battling stage 4 cancer. It's a fairly new diagnosis. They're getting their mind around it. She's in treatments. And she was just regaling me with the amount of people who mean well without asking her any curious questions, advising her to do things like drink celery juice or just stuff that they'd heard from someone somewhere. Now, they really do mean to be helpful, but now this poor woman who is courageously fighting cancer now has to manage her caregiving friends. It's straight out of the book of Job. You know,
Yeah.
Job's friends who can't stay quiet and have to explain away his suffering so they don't catch it. I see that all the time. I think chaplaincy for me was an exercise in restraint. It was kind of life-changing learning how to do that.
You're absolutely right, and I feel it benefits us in every other relationship. But it's restraint. You said that correctly, because I've met chaplains and I've met chaplains. I've met pastors and I've met pastors, and the ones who you feel the most blessed by usually say the least. And they
Yeah.
usually just are sitting restraining every story that's coming to mind that they think relates and every solution that they think is going to provide anything. And rather, they're just sit back and let you fill the room. Yeah. You use the word curiosity, and you're making me think how much we need to use that more with ourselves. Like, why am I feeling this way? Why did I walk out of that room so mad when nothing happened after I left that patient or that parishioner? Like, what's going on? And rooting the sort of getting to the root of that emotion rather than just being, well, I'm having a bad day.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I mean, even, when I think about back to pastoring and every pastor, I was a preacher, every pastor attracts critics. And out of critics, there's always a small band of committed bullies. They're not just everyday people that have an opinion. They really kind of get their kicks out of kicking the pastor. You've seen these people, Robby. Well, as long as I'm fixated on the other, I'm complaining, I'm feeling self-pity, how hard is it to be a pastor, this kind of stuff. As soon as I take my attention off them and put it on myself, boy, do I discover how I'm part of the problem. Yes, they shouldn't be treating me this way, but also, yes, I should stop incessantly explaining myself because reactivity is contagious. So they're dumping their reactivity on me, and my need to please and my need to be seen is taking over. And so the more that they kick me around, the more I try to show them I'm a good guy, which just gives them more ammunition to hit me with. So the path to freedom isn't to convince them, it's to manage myself. And one of the simplest lessons we teach people when people are, doing coaching with us, just because someone's spreading anxiety doesn't mean you have to catch it. And just that simple idea breaks the autopilot, and curiosity about yourself is a huge tool in noticing when you are unintentionally keeping the problem alive.
Yeah. And we can't explore those things if we're running so fast that we don't have time to, can we?
Right.
There seems like there's a trail of what you're talking about that requires moments of stillness, of silence, of reflection. That I imagine most pastors tend to be pretty A-type, pretty driven, entrepreneurial, vision, and they're going.
Yeah.
And I find that the hardest people just to get to like sit still for more than 20 minutes and just be in a moment.
Yeah. Yeah. And, some of those classics, especially when they're younger and they don't have as much life under their belt, it's often their team that is bringing me in, saying, can you talk to him? because what's going on is that classic type A driven leader, like that is a gift from God. There's nothing wrong with that. But what happens is that young leader indulges that gift and it becomes an idol. It becomes their driving thing and
Yeah.
it's unregulated. And so that young leader is generating massive levels of anxiety on the team, but the team are carrying the anxiety. And because that leader isn't carrying it, well, they don't feel it. So they don't experience what it's like. So yeah, I've had just, I got to say, Robby, it's unusual. Most people I work with are self-aware. But
Okay.
I've had the handful, I don't know, 5%, maybe 10% of the groups I work with where there's a driven, unaware leader. It's usually a male. He thinks that I'm a waste of time. That if we do my tools, that the church will just sit around like pot smoking hippies, not on mission. And I'm trying to say to that person, how's your marriage? Look at your staff turnover, like 20% turnover a year or higher. Who's the problem here? People can't
Mm,
stay and thrive under your leadership. And if we get a little darker with that kind of leader, that kind of leader is typically the same type that make the newspapers, make the internet stories. What you see is decades of them dumping anxiety, everyone around them making adjustments to carry it.
right.
And then the whole thing came crumbling down because everyone around them is letting them get away with it too. They're saying things like, well, that's just Tom. And no one's perfect. Look at all the good that God is doing. And so they make these justifications that keep an unhealthy leader propped up. But my vision for this is there's a lot of Christian examples, but I'll use like Yo-Yo Ma, the cellist. Think of your favorite athlete. These are the most optimized humans. There's no better musician than Yo-Yo Ma. When he plays that cello, he looks as relaxed and like a kid as anyone you'll ever meet. He's taking so much pleasure out of it. I think of my friend Christine and Nick Kane. It's hard to think of a more driven type A leader than Chris Kane, but she's extremely healthy. She works hard on her emotional well-being. And so the argument is somebody who does this work doesn't become lazy, they become free. And most commonly,
Mm.
organizational efficiency goes through the roof because now your team is activated to be themselves rather than having to expend all of this energy managing you.
Yeah, yeah. Imagine how much energy goes back into themselves and in their own mental health because they're not running around assuring that that leader is happy and getting what they need. And then they have a moment to go, wait, am I even okay?
Yeah,
And
that's
do I
right.
even have time to do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So on that note, you mentioned this, just you passed by this quickly, but I want to go back to it. Needs. And you've talked about the false needs that a lot of us believe in.
Yeah.
What are those? Because you've kind of narrowed it down to a list that's pretty much normalized. What are false needs and how are they impacting our anxiety and our emotional health?
Yeah. False needs are fascinating. They're so
Yeah.
fascinating. A false need is something you don't really need, but in the moment you don't get it, like circumstantially, your nervous system acts like you must have it.
Mm.
So if we think about our nervous systems when you see like a deadly snake or when you have to avoid a car accident, your nervous system activates and pushes adrenaline through your body. God designed your nervous system to move to safety. And that's an incredible gift from God. And that's a real need. Seeing a rattlesnake or avoiding a car accident, that's a real need. Losing a child in a playground, that's a real need. But like with me, one of my false needs is approval. Therefore, these bully critics, when they were not just talking to me, but I could see them coming, my nervous system gets activated.
Mm.
And I'm now disconnected. I'm disconnected from awareness of God. I'm now in a threat response where I have to manage myself and manage them for everything to be okay. And it's fascinating because you don't get that big dose of adrenaline like a car accident. You just get a few little drips. But at the same time, it's not over in seconds like a near-miss accident. It's constant. And again, if we go back to these infamous leaders that are burned out and made the news, What happened is their false needs weren't getting met for decades, and their coping mechanisms got them into trouble.
Right.
Abuse, domineering leadership, secretly drinking, inappropriate relationships. These are all unhealthy coping mechanisms because they're false needs. A lot of people say, oh, they just had too much on their plate. I've never met a leader that complains about a big task. Most leaders are energized by a colossal vision. No, what kills leaders is untreated false needs. So yeah, there's 5 categories of them. I mean, humans have dozens of false needs, but they all come down to 5 groups, which is control, the need to be in control,
Mm.
perfection, knowing the answer. This is a common one with leaders. I have to know what to do. Being there for people when they're hurting, and then approval. Those are the big 5. And if we just pick 2 of them, like the being there for people when they're hurting, people might say, well, what's wrong with that? Like that's part of our call. But it's when you can't tell the difference between someone's need and your need to be needed.
Yes.
Now you get into trouble. You overcommit. You sacrifice yourself without even thinking. You just kind of run in and save the day. The other one that's easiest to notice is perfectionism, because what you're looking for is the threat, and the threat is always outsized. So for me, approval, the threat is disappointment or anger, or even honestly, Robbie, if I make a joke and no one laughs, like that, my nervous system acts threatened.
Mm.
For a perfectionist, the threat is a mistake. And when you look at the mistake, it's no big deal. So if you would ask the average perfectionist, just send an email to a group of people that really matter and put 5 spelling mistakes in it on purpose. Well, in reality, no big deal. Maybe a few people call you. Maybe your reputation gets a little bit tarnished. The world's going to go on. But your nervous system, just the idea of sending in mistakes on purpose, end of the world. In fact, that's why the average perfectionist will check their emails like 12 times before hitting send.
Wow.
Incessantly editing, because a grammatical mistake is directly linked to their emotional regulation.
Yeah, mine would be approval, 100%. And I think the wrongful coping mechanism for it is I act like I actually don't really care.
Oh, yeah.
I get a little punk rock, like, oh yeah, I don't care, but deep down I care way too much, and so I put on that veneer. Why are they false needs? So they feel very real. They affect us deeply and emotionally. Why is our body telling us you have to have this? What do we need in place of those things? Like, why are they false?
Oh, I think it's very hard to follow Jesus. I think it's very hard to live by faith. God's invisible, and therefore at times God's intangible. And from our youngest memories, we have been depending on ourselves to get through life. So I think they're pretty deep-seated coping mechanisms that all of us have used to adapt to survive life. I also think, each one of these has a healthy equivalent. And so like if you and I are people pleasers, well, the healthy equivalent is we're probably both pretty able to be in any environment and find a way of connecting with somebody. We're probably both, I would guess, Robbie, that you can probably be plunged into an environment in Zimbabwe, and there's a group of people there, and you can probably figure out common ground, ask questions, and they feel really cared for. Well, that's a real skill. And so I think what happens is God gives us gifting and wiring, and then we make it into an extreme that we chase. So when you start to realize that the big 5, they're God's character traits, they're things that humans were never designed to have. God's in control, so we don't have to be. God is perfect. We get to make mistakes. You could run down the list and see these are all like God-sized roles. And
Yes.
anytime a human is no longer human-sized and trying to live out a God-sized job, we're going to get anxious. Jesus' yoke is no longer easy now because we've actually put on our own yoke in the name of Jesus. We blame Jesus for all this, but it's actually a self-imposed gospel that's killing us.
Wow, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so in this vein, we're talking about how it's important that we pay attention to these things. We're thinking about ourselves. We're introspective. We're pausing. We're doing that. How much is too much? Like, can we go too extreme into our mental health, into ourselves, navel gazing? Where are we straying too far? Where do we need to build resilience rather than, pull back? Like that's a tricky space. Any ideas in that?
That's a really important question. I don't think there's a simple answer,
No.
um, but I do think there are some rhythms that the whole end journey is not the well self is not the end; it's the means. The end is the glory of Jesus, the glory of God, the proclamation that that Jesus is lifted up and all men and women drawn to Him. That's the end. So we do this work fundamentally for the glory of God. So I think that's one gut check in it. I'm not particularly interested in the self-care movement, even though a lot of my work sounds like self-care, and it is. It's just self-care so that I am a jar of clay through whom the gospel can flow.
Right.
Okay, so then how much is too much? Well, I guess on the one hand, if you have a full-time job, there's 40 hours a week to do your job. That kind of is a natural parameter to make sure you're productive. But there's no question, Robbie, that for some people, they do need to quit. For some people, they need to step aside and invest money and time in being well.
Yeah.
Retreats, therapy, intensives. I'm a fan of all of those. So
Yeah.
I can't answer beyond that. I've not yet. My primary audience are driven Christian leaders. They're not prone to lazy. They're so driven by the gospel cause. I don't really meet any that end up doing this work and then just kind of retire early, and sit around. Most people I know, when they so-called retire, they just start volunteering somewhere or, so I've not seen this to be a real problem, to be honest.
Well, and I think you summed it up well as you started answering, was that if the ends is a well self, then you've already lost track. And I
Yeah.
think that's the secular model, right? Is the reacquisition of the innocent child inside that was damaged, and then just a well self and setting up a bunch of boundaries so you never hurt again. And
Yeah.
that's not a gospel centered life, is it? Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
What is something you wish more leaders were doing daily for themselves and their teams?
Yeah, two really simple things. Checking in on themselves multiple times a day.
Yeah.
2 to 5 times a day. Just checking on you. How am I doing? What's going on in me? It takes 1 to 3 minutes. If somebody asks me, how are you doing? My default answer is I'm fine, which means I don't know how I'm doing. That's my real answer. I don't know. I don't think
Yeah.
about it.
Yep.
So what I had to learn to do is when somebody asks how I am, I had to learn to say, I don't know. Thanks for asking. Let me check. And then it gets awkward. They just kind of stand around while I kind of figure myself out. 30 seconds, a minute later, I know how I'm doing. So that's number one. Number two is I wish more teams had the bravery to say or ask, how do you experience me when I'm at my best? How do you experience me when I'm not at my best? And then to commit to the team, I'm going to work on that second one. And would you help me if you see that I'm not at my best, if I'm leaking, if I'm causing trouble, would you come and show me? I think if more teams did that, it would build team health literally overnight. It's not about all of us always doing our best. It's about a culture where we make room for everyone to be human. Everyone's going to have a bad day once in a while. But now we're caring and helping each other rather than being frustrated and having gossip and sideways meetings. And the third thing everyone can do is just intentionally bump into God's love several times a day through, I call it micro habits. Just little habits to take 1 to 3 minutes at a time. I did one right before coming on this show. I made a cappuccino and I got a couple of little chocolates and I just took a few minutes to thank God for the taste of cappuccino and chocolate. And it took me a few minutes, but I'm just giving it's basically a gratitude experience of what good gifts has God put in your life. Right after this podcast, my dog will be waiting for me to rub his ears. And as I rub his ears, it'll take 20 seconds. I'll thank God for my dog. And just through the day, just noticing God's goodness and relaxing into it. That would be the three things I think would change a lot.
I love that. I love that. There's so much, it's a very groundedness in that practice, right? Like, let me remind myself before I continue sprinting on and running towards the next thing and multitasking, let me do one task.
Yeah.
And let me take great joy in it and recognize God's presence in it. That's often how I direct people to pray when I'm teaching, doing discipleship at church or kind of counseling anybody. I do sort of a contemplative prayer first. And I just ask them, like, we do some like the grounded, like counseling techniques, right? Like, look at three things in the room, notice what you're wearing, feel your feet on the floor. And now just thank God for the breath that's coming in, and for some of them, especially, more traditional Christians, they're like, this feels a little new agey, Robby. I don't know. But I remind them, I was like, no, God made your body. He made your spirit. He made this, the possibility of this room that we're in and the clothes you're wearing. And it's good to just recognize that you're not just flying through and doing the next thing. And then I usually tell them, whatever things you carried in the room, we're going to fold them gently and put them aside. Which I found most people, they'll actually do it physically. I don't tell them to, but I tell them, just put those things aside. They are important. We're going to pick them up later.
Yeah.
But we're just going to be fully with God in this moment. So I appreciate that. I try to bring people just back to the moment and enjoy a cappuccino and chocolate and know that you can find God in that. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Steve, you get to meet a lot of pastors. I've known and met a lot of pastors. I've been in the church pretty much my entire life. No, literally my entire life. And one thing that I found common about pastors is they do need support. They do need love. They do need close relationships. Many of them find it hard to, find those people that they feel they can be their authentic self with. And if they do open up, and sometimes they get burned, they don't ever open up again.
Yeah.
What's something, I guess, people can do toward their pastor, just saying, if ever you need that, I'm here, or even a pastor they know, it's usually not a congregant. And also what can pastors be doing or trying to seek out those relationships? Because I think we know pastors need love, they need support, and they need people who want nothing from them as a pastor. We need a relationship because you need relationships, all people. So it's sort of broadly looking at what stops pastors from seeking that, getting it, and maintaining it.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think pastors, having been one and am one, we carry an unhealthy pressure to follow God well, to represent God well, and I think that can keep us from being human-sized. Especially, if we are the Bible teacher, it just everything gets mixed up. Our paycheck, our identity, our vocation. So my identity is God's child. My vocation is God's employee. I end up relating to God more as employee than child. Some of that happens. It gets complex, though. People don't give us enough grace that a pastor wears multiple relational hats with everyone in the church. Yeah. I think about my elders, with some of my elders, like they are my boss. I am their pastor. We are friends. Some of them serve as volunteers in another ministry. So we've got 4 or 5 hats just with my eldership, and these are good people. This isn't about, I've never liked it. There was an era where sometimes I go to conferences where pastors would grumble about congregants. I don't like that. Mm-hmm. We're all human beings, but we don't appreciate that these multiple hats infect relational well-being. My favorite advice comes from Glenn Packiam, himself a pastor. Glenn talks about developing and cultivating a constellation of relationships. A pastor should have a variety of relationships. And he says it's akin to Lord of the Rings, the Fellowship of the Ring, where Frodo had a king, he had a sage, he had a friend. And Glenn kind of lays out that he had a healer. Glenn lays out the different roles in your life. But as I heard Glenn talk about that, each of them has one hat with Frodo. And so what I did after being a lead pastor for 5 years, I realized that all of my close friendships were inside the church. Some of
Mhm.
that was wonderful, and some of that bit me pretty hard. Also, some of that bit congregants pretty hard. Like, I used to feel sorry for myself, but I didn't reflect on the fact that when I'm knocking on a congregant's door, they don't know if the friend or the financial guy is, like, am I
Yep.
coming to ask for a donation? So it goes both ways. But 5 years into pastoring, I started basically cold calling other pastors in the area, almost like dating. It felt like I'd gone back to high school. I'd cold call some dude, we'd grab coffee or lunch, and I'm kind of exaggerating, but at the end of it, I was like, well, I had fun. Do you want to see me again? Like, and it's pretty awkward. It's pretty humble, but there
Yeah.
were a number of guys that I just played my hand. I said, I'm lonely. I don't have good friendships outside the church. So I need friendships where we just have one hat. And those are now my best friends. That was 15 years ago now. Those 5 men are my best friends. And I've got friends inside the church for sure, but it's less complicated.
That's probably the funniest and most accurate depiction I've heard of that. Is cold calling and going on dates, because
Yeah.
you're putting yourself out there. I mean, and
Yeah.
because unfortunately there is still a sense of suspicion and competition with a lot of especially small churches.
Yeah.
We've got a really bad amount of it here where I live, and
Really?
so really bad, really bad. It's a scarcity mindset where
You have an amazing pastor there in Albuquerque, Nate Bush, one of the
yeah.
finest pastors in the country, I think, who does so much unity and city building stuff. Man, anyone listening in Albuquerque, look that guy up.
And there are some good ones here. There really are, and more so probably thinking more in Santa Fe, north of us, than Albuquerque, but it's here, and we have a large Catholic community. It's massive, and they are very insular, and so it's like there's this pie chart, and it's like the Catholics have all this, the New Agers have all of this. There's this little sliver of people that the evangelical, non-denominational churches have to grab. And so it's like this, why are you calling me as a pastor?
Yeah.
Like, why are you holding an event and inviting the whole city? What are you after? You're after our people. And that, so if that's your posture towards, the kingdom of God as being scarce, then seeking out pastoral relationships and friendships becomes impossible. And I'm seeing that up close sort of in this area a little bit.
Yeah, I'll just say I pastor in a highly unchurched region in the country, and I have a subjective opinion. I've not proven it that the less churched the region, the more the churches work together, the less competition. That may not be accurate, but that's been my experience here in Colorado.
That sure feels right. It seems right. Yeah. We didn't cover this, but just briefly, anxieties. So you work with people helping to be sensitive, know themselves, understand their anxiety, but you put that on a spectrum because I think there's still a lot of bad information out about what anxiety is.
Yeah.
It's not just this singular emotional frantic state and then it goes away. So can you just, in kind of our closing bit, take us through what exactly this thing is and what's the spectrum of anxiety and what are you seeing when you're working with people?
It's so tricky. Anxiety, the problem with that word is it just covers so much territory, that one word.
Yeah.
But in reality, there are so many different kinds of anxiety. And what's interesting is they are generated by different causes and they look very different from each other. So, bipolarity, for example, is a form of anxiety. Well, it's not generated by anything like what reactivity is generated. So you've got acute anxiety, you've got chronic anxiety, you've got generalized anxiety disorder, you've got trauma, you've got grief, all these different anxieties. It wouldn't take much for the average human just to brush up on. In fact, one of the things my team are developing is just a simple like playbook. Just every kind of anxiety will get 2 pages. The first page is, what causes it and what are the exhibiting symptoms. And then the second page is what's the best treatment for it, whether it's clinical or just, amateur. I just think that would be helpful, like an NFL team has a playbook. And that way, any organization could have a little 5 to 10 page playbook on when an employee, for example, keeps blowing up meetings but acting like they're the one being blown up. Open your playbook and kind of, I wonder if this is what's going on. And it's not about an amateur diagnosing someone. It's just about being more particular about how we help people with their anxious habits. So that's not a particularly concrete answer, but it just helps to know there are a variety of anxieties. And most, again, if we go back to that type A leader who's in a hurry, they say to themselves, well, anxiety is just worry and fear, and I'm not worried and I'm not afraid, so I'm not anxious. Well, this just betrays a proper understanding of coping mechanisms and nervous system regulation and just how linked all of that is to our faith.
I think just in that answer, you're pulling this out and being like, look, there's a whole swath here that maybe you've never even considered. It's like I talk about emotions with people as like dashboard lights on a car, and so you got that light on, that just tells you to look. But once you start looking, this is connected to that wire goes here, this thing looks like it's leaking. So the emotion coming out is just telling you to have a look, and then you've got deeper work to figure out and assess what's really going on.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, again, that takes the intention and the desire to take that time to work on yourself, to humbly know I've got to work on this. And it does have to take time.
We just ask leaders, we do intensives. I'm doing one starting this Sunday night. We'll have a group of people from around the world fly in, spend 5 days with me and my team. And, this work can be overwhelming. It can feel like a
Yes.
never ending. And we just say, no, just figure out what habits, where are you tired of running into yourself again and again? What people in your life take up too much space in your brain? Just start there. You don't have to do a whole life makeover. I don't like those coaches that say everything about you is wrong. That's not like you've gotten this far already. We're just trying to help you with the parts of your life that are costing you more than you want to pay anymore. And that's freeing for people. They just take 1 or 3 things and they're like, all right, I'll chip away at those. And then the beauty of our coping mechanisms, they're all linked in like tentacles. You start unraveling 1 or 2 and the others tend to go away as well. So it is catalytic work once you start this work.
That's relieving to hear, because I think a 5-day intensive on anxiety with Steve CUSS and friends, that sounds like what am I going to subject myself to in that? Like, am I ready to cut my heart open and let them play around? But you're like, no. Wherever anyone is at, what the work is that you want to do. And let's just take a couple things. You don't have to walk out a different person, a different human entirely.
No, there's a couple of things that are key, and it's what we do in an intensives, but it does relate to anybody. The person doing the work always has full agency. We never reach into your life and pull something out and say, you better work on this, Robby. It's always like, Robby, what are you wanting to work on? What do you want to explore? So just having agency relaxes you and makes you safe. But the other thing, Robby, is laughter and playfulness, wildly underrated. Like laughter and playfulness are massive anxiety antidotes. So if anyone ever brought me in to do a workshop, and if you read the testimonials when I do workshops, one of the most common words in a testimonial is fun. It's like, man, Steve came in, we had fun as we were working on our reactive habits. So that's really an important piece as well.
I love that. I think the best teams I've ever been a part of injected fun as much as they could,
It's a big deal.
It is a big deal, and it seems like it wouldn't be, but then we've all been a part of a team that was not fun and that everything was business. Even if it was a really great high functioning team, it's not somewhere you wanted to be every day.
No, that's right.
And the time passes slower. Steve, I would talk to you all day, but I know you don't have that. But thank you for the work you're doing. Where should we direct you? Where should we direct people to learn about your work and maybe get connected if they want to do an intensive or kind of check out your resources?
Yeah, people can go to stevecusswords.com. That's the easiest way to get all my tools. I've got a podcast. My books are on there. The best thing we offer is we have an online community. We open it up 3 times a year, just for a few days. People all kind of pile in at once. And so if they get on the waiting list or if they get on my email list, next time we open our private community. I mean, it's a bargain financially. We're in 41 countries, so you'll meet people from all over the world. We do Zooms together. We go through this work together. And we intentionally priced it low, mostly for our global audience, missionaries, people like that are on different budgets. So, a year of my private community is cheaper than hiring me for 20 minutes on one-on-one Zoom. So yeah, stevecusswords.com. You can chase all that down and make use of whatever's helpful there.
It's the best website I've ever heard. Or your Instagram as well. Steve Cuss Words. And if you haven't figured that out, go look it up and you'll figure out why that's funny. Bit of that Aussie humor there, which I do miss sincerely. When I moved there, they're warning everyone they're sarcastic. And if they're sarcastic, that means they like you. And I'm like, sarcasm is my first language. English is my second. Let's go. And I miss it. I miss that. Taking jabs at each other. Yeah, dry as, and you never know. Are they joking? They're probably joking, but yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
Well, God bless you, Steve. Would you be willing to just say a word of blessing or prayer for those who have joined us and
absolutely. Yeah. Oh, Father God, thank you for the reminder in Lamentations 3, Lord, that Jeremiah gives us, that every day your mercies are new. Every morning we wake up to new mercies from you. And it's not like you were running low on mercies the night before, but it relaxes our soul to know that we orient our life and our being around a merciful God. Thank you that your faithfulness is great every day, and that we can carry a human-sized load, which is how your yoke is easy and your burden is light. Thank you, Lord, that you have equipped us to do difficult things and serve in broken places because of your goodness. Lord, thank you for the reminder of Dallas Willard that the one word to describe Jesus is relaxed. And may that be true of us. May that be what people say about us. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, Steve.
You bet. Thanks, Robby.